Good evening, everybody. The Music Fan is back, bringing smiles to the faces, knowledge to the people, and most importantly, music to the masses. Back with another Are You In? Now, I'm going to do a quick warning up front. Usually, I don't do it for these album reviews, but I felt like with this album touching a lot of dark and heavy topics, including suicidal ideation, nihilism, and existentialism, I felt like it was important to talk about this up front, especially for people who aren't in the right mindset to hear stuff like that. If you are in that space, take the time that you need, and of course, don't listen to this album right now because it will bring up a lot of those stuff. Come back another time to listen to this album review when you feel like you have the right mindset, because I think there's a lot of really important topics and conversations about this album, but at the same time, I don't want to put anyone in a bad state. I've definitely been there before, so no need to have someone else be there. So with that out of the way, tonight we are talking about the newest album from Avenged Sevenfold entitled Life is But a Dream. This is the 8th studio album from Huntington Beach, California heavy metal, progressive metal, and alt metal band Avenged Sevenfold. Current members including M. Shadows on lead vocals and piano, Zaki Vengeance on rhythm guitar and backing vocals, Sinister Gates on lead guitar, piano, and co-lead vocals, Johnny Christ on bass and backing vocals, and Brooks Wackerman on drums. Their previous albums include Sounding the Seventh Trumpet in 2001, Waking the Fallen in 2003, City of Evil in 2005, Avenged Sevenfold, their self-titled album in 2007, Nightmare in 2010, Hail to the King in 2013, and The Stage in 2016. This band has an extensive and pretty deep discography, in my opinion. If you were to tell me when I first heard them in 2005 with City of Evil that their discography would extend the way that it has, I would have probably laughed. Of course, my first diving into them is City of Evil, 2005. I remember hearing backcountry all over the place. I think probably at first was like on ESPN or MTV or VH1 or something like that, where I saw an ad for the City of Evil music video. Of course, also back in the day was MySpace. I was all over that, listening to all the tracks I could from City of Evil. And when I finally heard all of it, I was like, this is an incredible album. And I still think it's an incredible album. To me, it's one of the best albums from the 2000s by far. I don't think there is a bad song on City of Evil. Of course, you have some overplayed songs like Beast and the Harlot and Backcountry, but there's also so many great songs. Sidewinder, Strength of the World, Betrayed, Trashed and Scattered. I also really love the ending song MIA. I think it has so many great progressive thrash ideas on here that just work so well, and all the arrangements have their own life to them. And of course, Sinister Gaze and M. Shadows sound incredible on this album. Going backwards, of course, you do see that they start off with a little bit more of a metalcore sound. Sounding the Seventh Trumpet is their probably rawest material, and the one where M. Shadows screams the most. I can't remember many sung parts on there other than Warmness on the Soul, which I think is a pretty cheesy song, and for that it's probably my least favorite Avenged Sevenfold album. Waking the Fallen, of course, is another solid album of theirs. It doesn't have that diversity in sound that City of Evil has, but it just makes up for it in sheer intensity and great energy on their arrangements. Starting off with Unholy Confessions, that's a great song, but then you have Chapter 4, Reminiscence, Desecrate Through Reverence. Both I Won't See You Tonight Part 1 and Part 2. One of their best ballads, honestly, I Won't See You Tonight Part 1. Great build. And then, of course, the ending song in All Things Will End. Just a phenomenal album that, even though sometimes it feels a little bit same in terms of the tone, is just chock full of great songs. And eventually you get into this era of theirs where they start to experiment a little bit more. You see the ideas that are a little bit more progressive on City of Evil, but that gets taken a little bit further with their self-titled album. You can think of like their more radio-friendly songs like Almost Easy and Afterlife, but Afterlife has a lot of string work in there that adds a new layer. But of course you can't forget these more out-there songs like I'm Bound the Wild Ride, Lost, and of course A Little Piece of Heaven. A 7-minute song about killing your girlfriend, having sex with them coming back to life, killing you, and them having sex with you, and then getting married. Yeah, They get weird sometimes, but all in all, it's a fun album. Yes, there are some more radio-friendly songs on here other than like Afterlife, like Dear God, but all in all, it is a weird mix of songs that just works so well. My second favorite album of theirs has to be Nightmare. There's a lot of personal reasons for that, with my dad passing away not too long before Nightmare came out, and like with the coinciding death of the Rev before this album came out, it just added another emotional level to there. There's some great songs on here, of course, like Nightmare, Buried Alive. But I also love some of the slower tracks like So Far Away and Victim. I think Victim is one of their most underrated songs. It's just so beautiful. And then, of course, the 11-minute track, Save Me, at the end. So incredible. Also, the fact that they had Mike Portnoy drum on this particular album from Dream Theater fame, it added a depth to, and just like a commendability in terms of like tipping his hat to the Rev in terms of like the great drum work that he did, that they needed someone on that level. You get a little bit of a dive with Hail to the King in 2013. That album to me is not bad, but it just is a little bit too Metallica friendly. Their drummer at the time didn't really add a lot of layers to what they were working with, so instead you got a lot of cookie cutter heavy metal and thrash metal songs, in my opinion. But of course, they killed it on the stage. So much so that was like the first Are You In that I did in years to bring back my channel. And it showed how far that the band had come from Hail to the King and even their previous work to do something like the stage, because it was so out there for them at that time. A lot of talk about the future and technology and our place in the world. To start off with this amalgamation of the stage, which, didn't eschew what they had done before, but just added a little bit of more quirkiness to it, was a great way of starting off this album. And then you have songs like God Damn, which is heavy riffing, Creating God, Stunning Disposition, which is super weird and had horns on there, Simulation, this like mind fuck of a song. But then you also have a 15-minute closing track called Exist, which is basically playing out the creation of the universe. And yes, it also has Neil deGrasse Tyson on it. Overall, just a very experimental album that we weren't expecting from this band. And it made me crave what they were going to do next. For like the first few albums, they were dropping an album every other year. And then it wasn't until Nightmare, Hail to the King, and The Stage, where they were dropping albums every 3 years. So you would think eventually we would get to a point where we would have a new album from them. But now it's 7 years later, and we finally get this album. A lot has happened with the band since then. Most importantly, that M Shadows has been dealing with a lot of vocal issues. Also, a lot of things have happened in the world. Most notably, the pandemic and the isolation from there. So much so that I wonder if that is a reason why this particular album has the themes that it does. To break this down as an overview real quick, this is probably the toughest album I'm going to talk about this year when it comes to how I feel about it. This isn't an album that I would say that you'd be able to put on a song or two and just jam out or rock out to it. To the point where when I saw them with Alexis on Fire, I was really trying to wonder what songs they were going to actually play from this album, because they did have a few singles, but each one of them kind of fit into the storyline. And honestly, these singles were also kind of weird, even for their standards. And when I heard that they were going to play the God trilogy at the end, I'm sad to have heard that Gates hurt himself during our concert, but at the same time, I'm glad that they didn't play the God trilogy, because I felt like that would have been a weird way of ending the concert. Instead, they ended with Unholy Confessions, Backcountry, and A Little Piece of Heaven, which to me was a great way of closing out that particular concert. I feel like so many of these songs are just vessels of the whole entire album, right? Where you just can't pick it apart and be like, yeah, I'm going to listen to this song a bunch of times. But that being said, that doesn't make this a bad album. In fact, I think this album is unique in the way of the lyrics themselves fit so well with the arrangements that are going around it. Let me dive into this and see if I can explain what I mean, because I feel like other than me, this has been one of the harder albums to get a consistent ranking on. There's a bunch of people who really enjoyed this album, and at first I was like, this is a really cool album. But then I've also heard some other mainstream reviewers like Crash Thompson and Anthony Fantano not really enjoying this album. Anthony Fantano going so far as giving this a 2 out of 10. My brother, who at first was on the same page as me, has said that with each particular playthrough, it's gotten weaker in his opinion. And there are moments where, for me, it is that as well. So let me try to explain where I'm coming from, and we'll see if I can get a verdict, shall we? We start off with a song called Game Over. This song brings out the narrator that we have throughout most of this album. And this narrator, from what we can tell, is contemplating suicide. And from what it sounds like, actually went through with it in particular songs. You get this acoustic guitar intro from Sinister Gates, which sounds awesome. And it like sets up this Metallica-esque intro for this album, because the first song feels very thrashy, and I've really enjoyed the arrangement on here. But to me, the vocals are a little bit the weaker part on here. It's not bad, it's just sometimes unintelligible because it's just so fast-paced and there's not a lot of breathing between all of the lyrics. But if you read the lyrics, there's kind of a reason for it. The lyrics are kind of a flash through this person's life as he's contemplating his past before he decides to take his life. And it just goes through these quick snapshots of like his youth, his adolescence, his romantic times, his adult times. So they're kind of seeing their life flash before their eyes, and these are just the short bursts of thought that come out as he's contemplating his life and if he's going to take his life. To me, that's super powerful, even if the vocals aren't amazing. The As It May chants provide a bunch of power. The only thing to me on this particular song is the chorus isn't super memorable. Then you get this very weird musical theater part with like acoustic guitar and flute. This nice lull of him basically contemplating whether or not he should be alive on this earth. Eventually, you get this piano that's very jarring and kind of brings you back into the last chorus, which goes back to the more fast, thrashy parts. Very interesting start to this album, and you're going to see that they're going to be experimenting a lot on this album. There isn't a lot of very catchy songs, and when they are still very weird. But if you're not scared off by this particular first song, you will get some very interesting and kind of rewarding songs throughout. Next up, we have Mattel. It talks about human life and kind of equating it to plastic dolls, everyone being similar without any original thought. We live in our hell of our own creation, and kind of also talks about the idea of like the Truman Show, people watching you, people pulling your strings. What I really like about the lyrics here is that it uses that metaphor throughout the imagery, right? The plastic daisies, clouds in the sky on a string, the bees buzzing around, the plastic birds. It's building this fake plastic world throughout the imagery. The song is also very bassy. The verse vocals are some of the lowest that Shadows has ever sung in his career. And the guitars are very chugging and very low, with some also very low bass lines. There's some interesting voice modifiers, like this megaphone sound on the pre-choruses that kind of feel like M. Shadows is talking to a community or a bunch of churchgoers. I do like the choruses that give a little bit of respite. It kind of plays around again with that lull idea from the first song. This, now I know that it might sound crazy, but I smell the plastic daisies, and it seems like we are all in hell. It's supposed to be this like respite part, but then again, nothing is what it seems. Eventually you get into this super powerful bridge with more active drum and guitar lines, kind of more black metal-ish kind of sounding, as Shadows is describing this hell on earth that has been created. The piano at the end is also a really nice touch to be able to have this lull at the end, and I will say that there's a lot of really interesting lull ideas at the end, kind of trying to keep this dream alive. Next up, you have the first true single on the album, Nobody. It's one of the more straightforward ones on the album. It starts off pretty sparse with some bassy synth work as you just basically have Shadows' vocals throughout. Eventually, you get a more expansive arrangement, starting off with some violins, some horn parts, and then you get this very noodly guitar line from Sinister Gates, which again fits very well in the topic of this song, which is about basically being one with the universe and realizing that you are everything and nothing at the same time. So, like, as you get this more expansive arrangement, you feel the universe kind of expanding along with it. There's also some great cymbal and drum work from Wackerman throughout this song, but my favorite part of this particular song, other than the very tasty guitar solo at the end, is the I See Nobody harmonies. Great use of chord progression, great use of harmonies. I like how this is a very straightforward arrangement, but there's so much that is thrown in to, give it some more interest. Yes, the vocals aren't the strongest, and this is probably like the biggest clash on the album in terms of the consistency of Shadows' vocals throughout. But again, like we said, he's been dealing with some vocal issues, and this album has been worked on throughout 6 years, right? So there's going to be some consistency issues at times. Overall, I think I'm not distracted by these vocals to not enjoy the arrangement that's here. Next up, we have We Love You, one of my favorite songs on this album. I love the vibe of this song, especially with the chugging guitar lines, the simplistic kick drum on the verses, the kind of chanting vocals from M. Shadows as he's talking about more sex, more power, more speed, build higher, build wider. Eventually, as the chorus comes in, the rest of the arrangement becomes a little bit more complex with some more interesting guitar lines, some better drum work, and some sung melody lines from M. Shadows. You might feel like there's a little bit of weirdness with like the intro idea, which is a little bit glitched out vocally, this more thrashy kind of vibe. But in context of what is going on with this song, it makes a little bit more sense. So lyrically, we're talking about like the cold nature of capitalism and corporations, making you think that your participation will lead you to a fruitful future when instead you're just another cog in the machine, right? So the chugging pace is very mechanical on the verses, and we're getting this very monotone lyric, which is the machine working at its most efficient, right? Then you have these moments of the look at the way you go, you're one in a million, and it shows that we love you. The humanistic part, right? Of trying to coerce you to be a part of the machine, right? And that's where like that beginning part feels a little bit off, because this part is talking about like, you mean everything to us. Look at the birds and the bees. Look at that you're waking up every day for us. But it's jarring, right? So from there, it's almost as if these words don't mean much, right? And you get the payoff of that when you get to the bridge part, because it brings that hard part back in the fast part, and it's basically the corporations and the powers that be showing their true form of like basically work yourself into the mud, right? So that safety that you had in the intro is completely gone, and then as the last chorus comes in, you have the verse part going in very slowly, but eventually it starts picking up speed as you get back to the main tempo of the chorus. I think it's a very cool concept of a song, and I like how the lyrics are channeled so much into the music itself. I also do really enjoy the slide guitar at the end, kind of a way of, again, after having such an intense song, getting a little bit of time to breathe as we move into Cosmic, my other favorite song on this album. Truly a beautiful song from Avenged Sevenfold. The first half sets up this idea of reincarnation and chasing an everlasting love throughout the cosmos. I think that idea is so beautiful. The idea of, as we hopefully move through more lives, that you always meet this same soulmate. The vocals from M. Shadows is very solid, giving way to probably the best guitar solo on the album. This beautiful, again, very like universal, feels like you're moving through the stars as you're hearing it. And it moves into this very beautiful and slow area in the second half, which starts off with just piano and vocals, but then you get some horn in there as well. And this is where M. Shadows is talking about all the ways that he would be reincarnated to be with this person as he's chasing them throughout the universe. I just think this is probably some of M. Shadows' best vocals on the album. It does eventually wrap up to some synths and electronic drums, which feel a little bit weird, but connected with the vocoder vocals as you move on through the song, it makes sense. It feels like you're floating through the cosmos, becoming one life after another as the rest of the song goes on. Again, another song that just encompasses the lyrical content so well. Halfway through, this is where we get one of the more questionable songs on the album, Beautiful Morning. After a first half that, like, the lyrics fit so well with the music, this one just feels a little bit already done, if that makes sense. So you have this song about your place in the universe and everything like that, but the song itself feels just a little bit all over the place. First, to start off with a galloping vibe with the triplet guitars, while the drumming is very fluid and adds some very interesting fills. The pre-chorus is a little bit more straightforward and plotting in this more 4/4 approach, with the chorus being more chunky and heavy. But the thing for me is the pre-chorus kind of just feels a little bit stagnated versus the verse and the chorus. And I don't really enjoy the melody on here, so it doesn't really bridge that idea very well. Then you get this kind of Beach Boys, Beatles-esque bridge with the floatiness and dreamlike state, which again, I understand the idea of going throughout a dream in this particular album, but after countless other songs from this album that already have approached this dreamlike state, it doesn't really add much to the equation. But there is some pretty nice piano at the end, which again, nice touch on this dreamlike state. Then we have Easier, another short and straightforward song before this ending quartet of songs. I've really enjoyed the contrast of sweet and light choruses in a major key using the vocoder versus heavier and darker verses in the minor key with this gruff effect on M. Shadow's vocals. It's talking about like the duality of life and how to experience it all when nothing truly matters. This is a very near and dear one to me because I've had this talk before as someone who's dealt with these existential crises, the idea of the connotation of the phrase nothing matters, right? And I think this is a perfect example, right? Some people look at the idea of nothing matters and sees it as a very depressing thing, right? It was like, well, I can't really do anything with my life because nothing matters. And then other people hear nothing matters and makes it feel freeing, right? Makes people live their life because if nothing matters, then let me live the life that I have right now. So I enjoy this duality, the light of the dark on this song. It's not the most complex song on the album, but after a bunch of complex songs that we've had, this straightforward song feels very nice. And then we get into probably the weirdest section on this album. You have the God trilogy, starting off with G, which has this more progressive rock vibe. The intro feels very Dream Theater-esque, Yes-esque, turning into something a little bit more arena Christian rock-ish, which makes sense in the idea of what is being put out there. At this point, M. Shadows is singing from the perspective of God, having him talk about him creating the universe and the people in there, and being ashamed of the people that worship him because those people are also putting out bad acts in his name. You get this chorus where it's all basically the rock groupies of God who are chanting his name and praising him and saying that we're going to do all these good things in your name so that we can have better status. I think it's a super fun song. I think it's cheesy, but I think the problem for me is that the vocals on here aren't that really interesting. I don't think the laissez-faire approach of God's voice in this particular song adds a lot, and I don't really like the chorus vocals on here. They feel a little bit raw and all over the place, so it makes for kind of grating moments in this kind of cheesy song. Then you have Ordinary, the O in this particular God suite, which is the perspective of a robot that wants to become sentient and feel human emotions. I think the music works very well in this particular song. This like electronic disco vibe with some funky guitar, some very groovy bass lines, some intricate synth lines. I like how the vocoder works very well on this song, and there's also like this synthy guitar solo that is weird but good, has a lot of colorful chord changes. Just a nice palate cleanser before we get into the last main song, which is Death, the D in our God suite. This is kind of like putting everything into a nice box and putting a bow on top of it. With Game Over, we had this already narrator contemplating their life, and this kind of like brings it to the end, right? This is the narrator finding peace in taking their life, and that the nothingness that comes with, moving into the afterlife or whatever is out there. This song is very dreamlike, very jazzy, like lounge jazzy. M Shadow's crooning about like this day that this person had where they cleaned their room and organized the house and then stepped over the edge and took their life. I think by the music, I don't think that this band is saying that that is the right thing to do, because you get these interlude parts with the music where it's jarring when you have in Game Over. It's very jarring. It's minor. It feels abrupt, and it's these moments of like maybe you're trying to wake up from the dream, or maybe these are the ending parts of, well, the dream's over, right? It feels like a closing of a curtain, and we can't necessarily say if it's good or bad. It's just more that it happened. Ending up with Life is But a Dream, which is this lovely way to end a very interesting album, right? This is Sinister Gates playing a piano instrumental. This is a way for the listener to ponder what the heck just happened. I would like to think of it as, this is the music of the universe. Whether you are in it or you're not in the universe, this is the music that still happens no matter what. I'm not necessarily a religious person per se, but if I was to say a higher power, I think the music of the universe is a great way of explaining it. The consonants, the dissonance, the chords, and the tension that are made throughout the universe and throughout the planets and throughout humanity and all that. I think that's a great way of explaining what happens in this universe. So to me, this Life is But a Dream, it's probably like the ending of the dream itself, but I think this is also probably the music that continues to go on through the universe whether we are here or not. And yeah, as you can see, this is a very hard album to talk about. I think a lot of this is very commendable. Talking about suicidal ideation is not the easiest topic, and nor do I think that this band is pro-suicide, but I commend them talking about this stuff, especially existential stuff. I don't really hear a lot of bigger bands talking about stuff like this because sometimes it feels taboo. So I commend them for not only talking about this, but kind of using the music as a vessel to talk about this. Most of the arrangements channeled the lyrics in such a impactful way that maybe if you're not getting the lyrics at first, as you piece them together, you're like, oh, I can understand why these arrangements were the way that they were. It's a lot in there that, I would say a lot of people think about. That's why it's so tough to talk about, right? Because this is an album that is very raw in the sense of its nihilism, right? And its existential curiosities. But also there's a bunch of beauty in some of this stuff, like in Easier and with Cosmic. This idea that like, if nothing matters, we find the matter in and of ourselves, right? Maybe there isn't a heaven or a hell, but more of we go through this over and over again, and if we do, we hopefully find the right people throughout these journeys, right? Yes, there's a lot of rawness, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of sadness in this album as well, but it also makes sense. I would not be surprised if this was another album that was caused by the pandemic, right? I can say that some of my most existential times in my life recently, and honestly, to share a secret why I wasn't doing a lot of videos in the first place, was because of the pandemic. I was very much in my head about a lot of this stuff. To hear it and read it in front of me, I appreciate a band doing that. Now, will I say that this is an album that I can like just put on immediately and be like, yeah, I'm having a great time? No. I think this is an album that you take in doses. But I think this is an important album from them. I think this is a very important album in general, even if it doesn't make my top 50. I think this is still an important album to listen to hear these perspectives, because it, for someone who has dealt with a bunch of these topics before, it doesn't make me feel alone. Maybe to me that is a little bit more personal than for others, and I can see why other people didn't really get a lot out of this album. But as I digged more and more, I really appreciated what this album was throwing out there. So for me, this is worth a full listen. Again, this is a very weird ride. You're going to have a lot thrown at you. And the first time, me, my brother, and one of my other friends, when they heard it, we were like, what the fuck did we just listen to? Right? And it didn't have that emotional potency the other times I listened to it, just because I knew what was coming up. But now with the lyrical context behind it, it just brings back that emotional potency. And this is why it took me so long to not only talk about this album, but also to review it. This is probably the most important album that won't make my top 100, right? This probably will get an honorable mention, but it's because that replayability isn't there. But there are some of those albums, like there are some movies, where you watch it once, you listen to it once, and that's all that you need. I know I threw a lot out there, but if any of this interests you, especially as an A7X fan, like, check it out. I know there's been a lot of controversy for this album in terms of how people feel about it. I know a lot of people haven't liked it, but I would say give it a chance. For me, it's in that mix of the middle albums, and that's not to say it's a bad album. It's just this band has had such great work throughout the years, and the replayability isn't there, so that's probably why, but still is worth a listen. All right, so that was super long. So let's cleanse our palate with my 96th favorite album of 2022. And this is going to be a much easier album to talk about. And the album, of course, is Big Dumb Idiot by Tom Cardy. I stumbled onto Tom Cardy a few years ago through my friend, Matt. We exchanged a bunch of his work throughout the years, and I was glad to hear that he put a bunch of those songs on an album. It might be a little bit lower because a lot of these songs I heard a bunch of times before the album came out, so it's not like there's a lot of new material. However, if you like stuff like Ninja Sex Party, you're going to enjoy Tom Cardy. He's a one-man band who uses usually just his keyboard and a couple of other instruments, but all these songs are so funny. Hashtag inspirational, a song about a guy who's trying to be hashtag inspirational, but he fell for a multi-level marketing scheme. Get Louis Theroux to do it, with the narrator channeling a news reporter, Louis Theroux, to be his guardian animal. Really enjoy Hey, I Don't Work Here, a song about a guy who just stumbles into these wacky situations where people think that he works at the place that they're at, but turns out he doesn't. Love High Five, a really dumb song about what you will do if this person doesn't give a high five. Not To Your Nice, a really fun song about Santa being bad. My personal favorite, though, the Ballad of Smoking Joe Rude Boy, a guitar-based cowboy song about Smoking Joe Rude Boy, who his guns are his middle fingers. Only 37 minutes, a bunch of really fun songs. If you're looking for a great comedy album from last year, check it out. Thank you so much for watching another long video. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, please give this video a like so I know that you enjoyed it. Let me know other albums from 2023 that you would like me to review. Share this with your friends. Ring that bell if you want to see more videos come out shortly and know when they're coming out. And then most importantly, subscribe to my channel. That way I know that you enjoy what I'm doing and want to see more videos like this in the future. So after a very long album review. We'll do a much shorter and simpler album next time around. Until then, this is The Music Fan, and I'm signing off.